there, everybody. This is Bob Murphy welcoming you to the first regular season game in the history of the New York Mets. The 3-2 delivery, the runner goes, and a little pop-up. Milner grabs it. He'll run to first. Double play. The Mets win the pennant. The Mets have just won the pennant in the Eastern Division.
Bob Murphy's voice is a source of comfort for Mets fans. For Murphy's voice is New York Mets baseball. How can any Mets fan feel differently? You see, Murph's voice is all they've ever known.
Kelly Murphy, daughter of Bob Murphy at the New York State Economic
Youngest daughter.
Youngest. Dad was originally from Oklahoma. Where were you? Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Boston.
Okay.
My dad's first job, he was recruited to interview for the Sox in Boston by Red Smith. They were very, very good friends. My dad had gone to college on the GI Bill, went into communications, was calling basketball games in Muskogee. So he was an Okie from Muskogee. So both my folks were from Oklahoma. So we moved to Boston, and I was born, my brother and I were born there. And then from there we went to Baltimore, which I'm sure you already know.
Yep.
And we were in Baltimore for a couple of years.
How did your dad get into business?
Well, just as I said, I think he was compelled by his older brother, Jack, was in communications, and that's how he chose that field. And I'm not quite sure how he got into calling the basketball games, but he really loved it and clearly had a knack for it. So when he met Red Smith and he said, hey, you know, why don't you think about getting into baseball? And the minute he did, he just fell in love with it.
Did he explain how he met Red Smith? I mean, he was iconic.
I am not sure. Probably through my Uncle Jack.
Okay.
Are you familiar with my Uncle Jack?
Murphy, right? Jack Murphy Stadium.
So, you know, Jack rode for the San Diego Union for many years and was instrumental in bringing baseball to San Diego, and wrote a book called Abe and Me. So he had a really great black Labrador Retriever, Abe of Spoon River. And when there wasn't a whole lot to write about in the paper, he would write stories about hunting with his dog in Montana or different things that they would do together. So after Abe passed on, and he mentioned that in his column, he was deluged with requests for for a book. Yeah. And it was very much like Chicken Soup for the Soul, just small vignettes and stories. Yeah, it was great.
So your dad's introduced to Kirk Gowdy, Boston Red Sox.
Yes.
And was he the play-by-play guy? I mean, Kirk was the play-by-play guy. Was your dad the color guy?
I believe so. I was quite small at that point and not a lot of talk about Boston after we left. We moved to New York when I was 3.
Okay.
So and that was obviously the beginning of the Mets. And he interviewed with Joan Parkinson.
Really?
Yes, and he had sent his audition tape was the Roger Maris call that he did in Baltimore. And that was pretty much what locked it in. And when he came to interview for the job, he met Lindsay. And Lindsay lived in Huntington on Long Island, and Lindsay said, oh, you got to come out and, you know, move to Huntington. So that's where we all grew up.
Did your dad talk a little bit about that early Mets personalities, like Joan Parkinson? Did he talk about her much?
He did back then. He always had a lot of respect for her. He really adored her and had a lot of wonderful things to say about her, but not so much about M. Donald Grant, but that's another story.
You know, I have a big, huge autographed piece of the 1962 Mets in my office. Casey Stengel.
Do you really?
Characters.
Wow.
Did he kind of reflect back on the early days? Did you remember him talking about that?
He did not. He did not. We begged him to write a book for the longest time.
Yeah.
And he said one writer in the family was enough. And that, you know, he had no desire to do that. It was tough to get him to talk about. We used to try and get him to talk about Oklahoma, and he wasn't interested in it.
Yeah.
He lived in the here and now.
One of his personality traits that I recall is he was he was a half full guy, a happy guy.
He was.
He saw things in a more positive light, not necessarily a homer. Do you get a sense of why that was?
I think he always lived his life very grateful and very happy. I think that both my parents grew up at a very difficult time in the Midwest, in Oklahoma. Neither one of them had much money. And I think that they were very blessed to find each other at the time and to get into such a terrific career, one that he truly adored and was so good at. So I think, and it's funny because I live my life very much like my dad. I wake up happy every day and I'm grateful to be here. And you know, I just think he really loved what he did and really appreciated life.
He had two partners for a longest period of time back then. Did he talk about the relationship with those guys?
He did. He did. He really got along well with them, and I think at the time, and I don't know if it's changed, but you know, I always remember him saying, "We're the longest three-man running team in history." Spent a lot of time at Lindsay's house in Huntington Bay. A lot of fun. His wife Mickey was a blast, and there was lots of parties and fun times. But we also vacationed together. The Kiner kids, we used to go to the Concord Hotel in the Catskills. So they would do a sports table, and you know, they would speak and answer questions, and we all got to run around and raise hell in the hotel the whole time.
What fun is that?
Yeah, it was great. Oh, it was terrific.
Good.
We saw Liza Minnelli perform there, and Melba Moore, and yeah, it was great times. Great times.
Lindsay Nelson, of course, always wore that kind of Joseph coat of many colors type of
He did.
outfits. Was he that way once he took off the jacket?
Yes.
Was he flamboyant?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
He was, and so was his wife.
Really?
Yeah, they were a great couple. Just very colorful.
Yeah.
Very fun.
And Ralph Kiner, I kind of get a sense that he wasn't necessarily that outgoing, was he?
I don't remember him being very outgoing at all. No, he wasn't. He was more serious.
Yeah.
More serious.
Do you get a sense? I mean, Ralph did not grow up in the broadcasting world. He didn't cut his teeth in broadcasting. He was a star.
Right.
So therefore, he's placed with two pros, Bob and.
You're right.
Did your dad feel like, not that they were carrying each other, but how they bounced off each other, what their skill sets were?
I think they had it worked out pretty early on. And if you watch the games back then, you know that.
Yeah.
I mean, the three of them would bounce between radio and TV the entire game. So it was just this rotation, you know, between the three of them. And I think the chemistry was really palatable. I think it was always there for them.
Right, Bob Murphy. Opening day less than 2 weeks away, Lindsay. You're right.
It began in 1962 as the new franchise chose the three voices that would tell the story of the New York Mets.
Number one, they were looking for somebody with a national reputation. That turned out to be Lindsay Nelson. They wanted a former National League home run hitter if possible. That turned out to be Ralph Kiner. And they wanted somebody with experience of doing everyday play-by-play Major League Baseball. Well, by then I'd had 8 years, 6 years in Boston and 2 years in Baltimore. So I sent in an audition to qualify for that. And fortunately for me, I won the audition.
During the season, your dad is on the road, he's gone.
Yeah.
62 games.
Yeah.
Was that difficult at home?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, became the rhythm of the way the family operated, but it was tough, sure.
Yeah.
He would, every February, before he went down to spring training, he would sit us all down and we'd have a big family meeting and tell everyone to behave and listen to your mother. And so he would be gone, you know, for weeks at spring training. But then, and again, early on, they had very few days off. The only days off they had, they were traveling to the West Coast or traveling somewhere else. So it was really 24/7. So I think it was one of the reasons we went to as many games, so that we could be near or around our dad.
During a game, could you be near your dad?
Not during the game.
Curious as to where you kind of.
So we had a couple of routines that, and you know, things that we kind of fell into. We would drive in with him most times, and he went in 4 hours before the game to prepare. He would always, you know, he wanted to go through the stats. He wanted to talk to as many people as he could. He wanted to be as prepared as he possibly could be for each game. So we, you know, we would roam around, and but whenever, and all of the families would sit behind home plate.
Okay.
So it was the reason they put the screen. Initially, it was just the backstop screen. And because, you know, we went to so many games and we were all together with the Seavers and the Grodys and the Cranepools, and, you know, we were all the wives, and half the time we weren't paying attention to the game, obviously. So to protect us from the foul balls, they put a lot more screening up. But so in the beginning of the game, for the national anthem, when everybody stood up, my dad would stand up and look to see where we were seated, and we would always turn around and wave at him, and so he could pick us out.
Cool.
And also during the seventh inning stretch. So he would look for us then, and then we would go out. And it was always a point of pride, you know, for us. People would be like, "Oh, is that your dad?" So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So what did you think when somebody tried to stop your dad to get his autograph?
You know, he was always really good about it. You know, they always had the area cordoned off, and they had a VIP parking. And mostly pride. You know, it's very funny. I was at a women's leadership group out in Montauk recently and speaking with a very good friend. And she asked me whether it was difficult, you know, whether I found it offensive or that I had given something up in my childhood as a result of my dad's fame. And I saw it quite the opposite. You know, I was just really proud of him, and you know, I was always very impressed by it. Because he had such a good nature about him, and
Sure.
he, you know, how you saw him on the air was how he always was.
That was my next question, because he came across with a smile on his face. Again, there is, if you read Wikipedia on your dad, and I did, they have 2 paragraphs. Probably the only time that he actually used a foul word, and it became headlines. It was that baseball game where Mets were up like 8
Houston,
runs.
the Houston game, right?
Exactly. And then all of a sudden the game's 6 runs, and now they're only down
Yeah.
they're still up by 6, or they're still up by 4, and finally the last out, you know, so-and-so hits a line drive, the guy catches, the damn game is over.
And now the score was 10-9. A base hit would tie or win the game.
If Franco can save this one, he has earned his money for the whole year. Here's the pitch on the way. Line drive caught. The game is over. The Mets win it. A line drive to Mario Diaz. And the Mets win the ball game. They win the damn thing by a score of 10-9. And win a line drive to hit the ball. Oh, wow.
So, and the backstory on that was my dad was so mad at himself that he let himself slip, and that became, you know, a point of notoriety for him. He was just, he absolutely hated that. He really did.
Well, it's funny. It's to this day. That's, you know, they'll say a lot of gracious things, but he's, you know, fell once. You know, fell out of sword once.
Yep. And yeah, he didn't like it a bit.
So when the season's over, well, let's back up a little bit. There were certain milestones in the Mets history which we all lived, and you lived very closely to it. 1969. You would have been
10.
10. You're a child. So what was the reaction at home? I mean, my God, nobody expected that to happen.
Yeah, just, you know, it was thrilling. We were at the division championship game, and that was back when, remember, people used to storm the field, and they took the turf and the bases, and we had to wait quite a while for my dad to get done at the end of that game. And I have a very vivid memory of standing up on the press level and just looking down on the field, and, you know, completely empty stands and just patchwork, you know, with all of the turf that had been removed. But no, it was thrilling. It was really exciting, really exciting.
Murphy has been our conduit to some of the greatest moments in franchise history. None greater than what he believes to be the best of all, the 1969 triumph of the Amazing Mets.
Well, the Orioles were heavy favorites to win that World Series. I don't think too many people involved with the Mets thought the Mets could upset Baltimore. I said, my goodness, they've won the World Series. It was incredible. What a marvelous moment.
Along the journey, Mets fans have grown accustomed to hearing Murphy's account of how their beloved team did in that day's ball game.
Did you find yourself going to school and that you were somewhat of a celebrity?
Yes, yes. Over the years, different, mostly men or boys or guys at the time, when they found out that they would have to immediately go into their imitation of my dad. Which brings me to my question. Do you have one that you'd like to share?
I honestly don't. Well, I do, but I'm not going to do it.
You're not going to? Come on. I think you should, but... no, but that was common. It was, you know, they would always kind of break right into it. But, you know, I would be driving to school and I would stop at the deli for coffee and a roll in the morning and go in and hear my dad on the radio sometimes. And that was always kind of a thrill.
So I'm trying to think of your childhood or schooling, just schooling. I mean, the reality, all home games, you were principally at the game, and you would be out there probably right after school, zooming out there, and you would come back very late.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't remember it ever being a burden, but you recall when you were young like that, staying up till 4 in the morning or late at night was not an issue, but we just, you know, we loved going to the games so much, but yeah. And there were a lot of day games back then, though.
I forgot the...
There were a lot of day games and double headers. Not my favorite.
Well, when you had school, obviously there was a conflict. So
yeah, I didn't leave school to go to the games that I ever would admit to.
Do you remember a highlight or two in the sense of your dad coming home after a game and just being excited with excitement, kind of like, you can't believe what happened tonight, Kelly?
No. I don't remember. Maybe with my brother. Again, I was the youngest of 4. My parents divorced when I was 12, so I was quite young. When he would come home late sometimes and miss dinner, and my mom was not inclined to make him dinner, he would convince me to make him a peanut butter and onion sandwich.
Ah, there you go.
So we had that little thing going on sometimes, but yeah.
Would he do stuff during the off season?
He did SEC football.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and he did the Orange Bowl every year. I was lucky enough to go 1 year to that. I think I was in my 20s at the time, and it was quite fun. You know, the VIP, the tents, the whole bit. But yeah, he did that every year. And you must recall, he did Bowling for Dollars.
Yeah, I didn't tell that. Yeah.
That was a long time ago. So yeah, he kept busy.
Kept busy. Was there a hobby?
No. He did not golf. You know, his career was so consuming. He would barbecue.
Yep.
He considered that a hobby, I think.
Was he a collector?
Um,
And he's in the middle of it all, and sometimes people just either feel it's inappropriate or not, but just, you're there. I mean, 69 Mets, 86 Mets.
yeah, you know, of course, all of the memorabilia that was important to him, he kept. I have the 69 World Series ring, and my brother has the 86 World Series ring. And then they made pendants for the wives too, so my sister has that.
Perfect.
But yeah, no, I do recall when I was little in Flower Hill Road that we had a lot of baseball cards. You know, just boxes and boxes of baseball cards, but not sure quite what happened to those.
Mother threw them out, and I saw there's a sign down here in Cooperstown which simply says, "All of your mother's cards are here."
I think my brother might have put some of them in his bicycle, but or flipped a few with friends. But
Was there any mingling at all with the players?
There was not a whole lot. There was a lot of, well, when we were small, there were a lot of opportunities for gatherings with the families. They did a really great family day where the boys would play baseball and we dressed up as cheerleaders, and so I have really fond memories of that.
Yeah.
And was watching them play back one of the old games, and I was like, I think that's us. Well, my brother would go on road trips with my dad, and had just terrific fond memories of that. I remember in my late teens, I begged my dad to introduce me to Lee Mazzilli, because I was like, I really want, and my dad was like, absolutely not. You will not meet him or any other baseball player, because he was on the road with them and he knew far more than I did at the time. But yes, he forbid it, actually.
A handsome guy.
A handsome guy, he was.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that aspect of his life didn't get into your life?
No.
Yeah.
Youngest girl, nope.
Yep.
Not me.
Happen, eh?
Not me. You might want to interview my brother if you'd like some other stories, but.
What's a question you would normally get asked, if asked, about sort of your dad? What's the thing I'm missing?
Gosh, I don't think you missed it. The question I get more times than not is, was he the same guy off screen as he was on? And he truly was, unless obviously we crossed him or did something we weren't supposed to. But really, for the most part, really positive, really grateful, really upbeat. I can't think of anything that you haven't asked. You've been very thorough. You're an attorney, of course. I would expect that. But
1983, he resigns, if you will, or from the Mets. I mean, I assume was that a difficult thing?
I think it was at the time. I don't think he let on quite how difficult it was.
Was that his choice, or
No, okay. No. For many years, M. Donald Grant would really kind of torture him and make him sweat out his contract, and we heard that about several other people. But he had gotten to a point where they asked him just to go to radio.
Yeah.
And once he made the move, he was thrilled to be in it. He was comfortable, he enjoyed it, and as you know, it really kind of came into a whole new legacy just with the radio. And
sure. He painted a picture. It was terrific.
Painted the word picture. It's one of my favorite lines of his.
Including, of course, his happy recap of wins for the home team.
Back with a happy recap in just a moment. The final score, the New York Mets 23, the Chicago Cubs 10.
I know I used it for a while, and I thought, hey, that's pretty corny. So I said, I'll stop using it, and I did stop. But strangely enough, I got quite a bit of mail saying, hey, we like it when you say that. So I said, okay, I'll put it back in for a while. So I put it back in, and the fans seemed to like it, so it stayed in.
At that time, Lindsay had left.
Yes.
Lindsay was gone. Ralph was there on TV.
Yep.
And your dad worked with
Gary Cohn.
Thank you.
So Gary Thorne did my dad's eulogy at St. Pat's,
Okay.
which was pretty amazing, with Cardinal Egan.
What do you remember about his funeral? The things that were told at that funeral,
Not a thing.
You know?
It was overwhelming. It was, I remember more, feelings and sounds and thoughts. I mean, just to have my dad honored in a way at St. Patrick's like that.
Sure.
We had to present a list of all our friends and family that were seated in the front part of the church, and everybody else was cordoned off. And, because it was open to the public. And the Mets had brought a bus in, and so they were all there. And the minute we got in our seats, they wouldn't let us get up, which was unfortunate because we really wanted to see and talk and receive, our friends and family.
Sure.
But I recall that at one point, because my dad's wife, Joy. He was married to my mom for 20 years and married to Joy for 30 years.
Okay.
Joy recently passed at 96 in February. And so Joy gave Gary very specific instruction that it was to be a very upbeat, positive celebration. And Gary has just an amazing voice. I just love him. And at one point he asked everyone to applaud. And, we're sitting in the second or the third row. And I remember thinking it sounded like thunder. And I literally stood up and turned around, and there were people all the way out onto Fifth Avenue. The church was just completely filled. And the sound of all that applauding was just beyond something I could explain to you. But yeah, and so it was I actually have the tape of that day. It took me a long time to find it and kind of uncover it, but I haven't listened to it yet, but I plan to. But unfortunately, I do remember Cardinal Egan being in town, and we were all, so happy about that.
Yeah.
But I went to opening day.
Oh, did you?
So I had called the Mets to let them know of Joy's passing, and they said, we'd really like to do a moment of silence on opening day. Would you and the family like to come in? And so I said, well, of course we would. And I called my brother and my sister and my half-sister, I should say. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it from Alabama. So, and then Lorraine Hamilton, who is a magnificent friend and woman and incredible employee who has taken care of kind of the VIP and the marketing forever, called me back and said, we're doing the Seaver unveiling. Would you guys like to come to that too? And I said, yeah, we would love that. So they really treated us like royalty the whole day. And that was all cordoned off in the parking lot. And we sat with the Shays and, joked around with them. And at the end, I went up and Gary was there. So I got to say hello to Gary and Keith Hernandez. And, it was, Franco was there. It was a really great day. And then they brought us out onto the field when they did that. So it was such a special day for the Murphys. And the way that the Mets honored and treated us. And my dad and Joy was really great.
Wow, this is unbelievable. Thank you for sharing all this.
You're welcome.
Is there a final word on your dad? Do you want to?
Oh, gosh. Being that we're here in economic development, I have to say, especially working with Millen and Phillips Lytle, which is a firm that I've always really loved, and Paul O'Brien, I got from my dad his very strong work ethic. And what he taught me was to always be prepared and be over-prepared. And I find so much of that is true with economic development. It's a team sport, and oftentimes we're faced with a lot of adversity, and IDAs are being a little bit vilified these days. So I try to take what he gave me in terms of being positive and diplomatic and working hard and just hoping that in the end all of that will prevail. So
This entire interview, you've had a twinkle in your eye.
really?
Yes, you have. So
My blue eyes that I got from my dad.
Yeah. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really.
It was fun to talk about. Thank you.
We are in Cooperstown. We're at the Otesaga. We're overlooking Lake Otesaga, the home of the Baseball Hall of Fame, and an inductee in the Baseball Hall of Fame is Bob Murphy. Do you remember that day?
I do. I remember it well.
In 1994, he was honored for his prestigious career with induction into the broadcast wing of the Baseball Hall of Fame.
I enjoyed that a lot. My family and close friends were all there. It was a happy day at Cooperstown, and it's always a hot day. The weather's always so terribly hot. But it was an experience I'll never forget. And I was delighted that Ralph Kiner was there, and Ralph was going to be part of the induction process. But everything about the ceremony was marvelous.
It was a very exciting time. We my dad and his wife Joy came up, they took a driver and came up, and I came up separately with, it was my sister, and my brother came at a different time. His wife had broken her ankle and he almost didn't come at all because they had a small child, but he couldn't imagine missing it, so he did manage to get here. It was an amazing time. So Friday night when we got into town, there was a huge party at forgive me, the name of the family. So at their home, they took us over. There was no press allowed. Yep. Big tents. They had, and just an amazing spread. And it was all of the Hall of Famers and their families, and a veritable who's who of everybody walking around. And we came back to the hotel and had to get ready, for the rest of the weekend. So we all said goodnight and, went into our rooms. And the minute we closed the door, my sister and I said, want to go to the bar? So of course we did. And at the time, Stan Musial was here. Yeah. And he was entertaining at the bar. And apparently that was his thing that he did. And so I was fortunate enough to see that. And as we were sitting at the bar, my dad walked in and joined us at the bar as well. So we all pretended we were going to bed, but we didn't. We were all too excited, I think. But yeah, it was just an amazing weekend. Sunday was, the Mets did a breakfast for my dad and honored him. So that happened in the morning, and my dad spoke at that. And when we went to Doubleday Field for the ceremony, we were in the second row. And I remember very clearly because George Steinbrenner was sitting right behind me.
There you go.
It was like I'm sitting in front of George Steinbrenner. And, well before cell phones, so several of my friends reported seeing me on ESPN the next day. But he spoke beautifully, well prepared, of course. And while he had his script, it looked as if he was doing it all straight from the heart. Just so proud, such an incredible experience. The entire thing from Friday night through Saturday, the way they treat the families when they're being inducted is just as if you're royalty. And I remember when I came home, I was talking to a couple of friends about it, and I said, it's a really once-in-a-life experience. And they went like, not for most of us. Once in a life, that's not exactly what you should call it, but it was just really special. We were so proud. And obviously he had dedicated so much of his time, and we had given up a lot of time with him as a family. Sure. So it was just lovely to see that be acknowledged in such a magnificent way. So it was a very special time. Do you
have any recollection of who the other inductees were at the time?
Yeah, it was Scooter.
That was it all?
Yeah, and a pitcher from Philadelphia, Steve Carlton.
Okay.
I got the first name.
Yeah.
Steve Carlton. Actually, the first time I had been back to Cooperstown was at this conference several years back. And I did, I took a walk during the day by myself into the museum, and I spoke to whoever was in charge, and I said, we're going to be here tonight for a reception. Could I take a few of my friends to go see, my dad's induction plaque? And they said, sure. So word got out, and it turned out to be me and 12 of my friends, and they were a little put out by it, but they took us nonetheless and brought us up. And as soon as we walked into the area, I don't know if you've been there, but and they have audio too. So as soon as we walked into the area, Dad was speaking through the audio.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, it was really cool. No. Bill Weir and I had just walked in, and so then we did it again the next year, and because we had made such a ruckus, they made us walk out the front door, around the block, outside the building, and then in the back door. So, but yeah, it was a lot of fun.
What's
A lot
the
of fun.
serendipity of all that, man?
Yeah,
There's your dad.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, just magnificent memories of that weekend. Really, really incredible time.
Well, I have a great memory of today, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is a hoot.
Thank you.
Now, after 50 years in the game and 42 years with the New York Mets, Bob Murphy will call his final regularly scheduled game. He leaves behind for millions of New York Mets baseball fans a voice that is part of their Mets memories, memories that will live on forever.
It's been a wonderful ride. I've enjoyed it. I love you and I thank you.